Okay, let's unpack this. Digital wallets.
Yeah.
They're fundamental for anyone involved in a digital network, obviously.
Right.
But the actual inner workings,
Yeah.
especially in some of these, emerging ecosystems, it can often feel a bit opaque.
Yeah, like what's the actual blueprint? How are the assets structured, managed?
Yeah.
It's not always clear.
Exactly. Understanding that architecture, the stuff beneath the surface,
Hmm.
it's not just for tech heads, is it?
No, not at all. It tells you a lot about the network's core design choices, its priorities even.
Which brings us perfectly to our mission for this deep dive. We're taking a really close look at the described architecture of wallets and core network components.
Specifically within the Pi network ecosystem.
Yes, specifically Pi.
Yeah.
And crucially, this isn't based on general crypto knowledge. We're sticking strictly to the sources shared with us for this session.
And those sources, they lean heavily on commentary from someone called Nicolas.
That's right.
And they reference code, described as Dr. Nicolas's code,
Mm-hmm.
and this material explicitly links things to, well, established concepts like Bitcoin's BIP 00032 standard. Plus, there's information about supernodes in there too.
So our objective is pretty clear then. We want to explore what these specific sources are actually revealing about a structure they call pyramidal wallets.
Which sounds like hierarchical deterministic wallets, basically, HD wallets.
Right, HD wallets. And we want to understand how these sources connect that structure to this question of distinguishing between internal and external Pi.
And also the role they describe for supernodes.
Exactly. It's all about pulling out the insights directly from the material we were given, nothing added.
Think of it like we're just trying to see the picture painted by these sources,
Yeah.
reverse engineering their logic almost.
Okay, good analogy. So let's get right into the heart of it. This concept of pyramidal wallets or HD wallets, it features prominently.
It really does.
And they make this direct, pretty notable connection to Bitcoin's BIP 00032. What's the core idea the sources are pushing here?
Well, what's really interesting is how specific they are. The sources point directly to BIP 32, and they cite Dimas Nawi, confirming its origin as, and this is a quote, directly from Dr. Nicolas's code.
Okay, wow.
Now, just for context, BIP 32, as you probably know, it's used in Bitcoin and others.
Mm-hmm.
It describes a way to generate this whole structured kind of tree-like hierarchy of keys.
Right, public and private keys.
Exactly, all from a single master seed. So one seed phrase basically manages a whole family of addresses and keys, but in a really predictable, organized fashion.
Okay, so it's like one root controls this whole branching system of keys, organized. And the source material, I recall, had illustrations showing this kind of hierarchy.
Precisely, that's the visual they're presenting.
And this is the foundation for what the sources are calling these pyramidal wallets.
That seems to be the case, yes.
Yeah.
And then the source links this very structure, these pyramidal wallets, directly to a question they say comes from many pioneers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you tell the difference between internal Pi and external Pi? And Dimas Nawi's commentary, or at least how it's presented in the source, suggests that if you study BIP 32 carefully, you'll find the answer. It implies this specific structure somehow facilitates that distinction.
That really jumped out at me, too. If the sources are pointing to a standard like BIP 32 for that purpose, how does a hierarchical structure, potentially enable that kind of distinction based only on what the sources are suggesting, of course?
Right, and it's important we stick to that. The sources don't give us, like, a step-by-step manual on the exact mechanism used within this structure for that internal-external split.
Okay.
But linking it to BIP 32 is significant because in standard HD wallet setups derived from BIP 32, that hierarchy lets you use different branches or paths in the key tree for different things.
Oh, okay, like different accounts.
Exactly, or separate paths for receiving addresses versus change addresses. It's common practice.
Got it.
So the source's explicit reference to BIP 32, right, in the context of distinguishing internal versus external Pi, it strongly implies they're leveraging this standard capability.
Meaning they might be dedicating specific branches, specific derivation paths within that tree structure to track or segregate these different categories of Pi.
That seems to be the implication, yes. The source suggests it's the inherent organizational power of BIP 32 that's key here.
Okay, that makes sense. The structure itself gives you the means for segregation, and the source suggests that capability is being used for the internal-external question, even if they don't spell out, which path means what.
Precisely.
All right, speaking of core components,
Mm-hmm.
the sources put a huge amount of emphasis on supernodes, What role are they playing according to this material?
Oh, absolutely central. The source material is very clear. It states that the node and supernode are the heart of the Pi network blockchain. Simple as that.
The heart. Okay.
And then it goes further with a really critical claim. All transactions will automatically follow the supernode formation.
All transactions automatically follow.
That's what it says. So based on these sources, supernodes aren't just like helping out. They seem absolutely central, maybe even mandatory, for how transactions get processed and routed in the network.
All transactions will automatically follow the supernode formation. That's a powerful statement about their function. It sounds almost compulsory.
It does.
Does the source give any hints about why that might be, or how that following mechanism actually works, again, just based on the material we have?
You know, they don't really dive deep into the step-by-step technical process of how the transactions follow the supernodes.
Okay.
They state it more as a fundamental rule of operation. This is how the network is designed, as described in these sources.
Right.
What the material also does is link to specific code references for things called supernode constants.
Okay.
And it includes information that apparently shows up on CoinGecko, specifically mentioning a Pi price of $314,000 and a total supply of 100 billion.
Interesting. They put that market data right alongside the technical stuff about supernodes.
Yeah, it's embedded right there in the discussion of supernodes. It suggests the sources see this, third-party market data as relevant context, perhaps related to network scale or potential value when talking about these critical nodes.
Okay, that's a fascinating detail, putting that market data snippet right in there. So let's pull it together. We have this hierarchical wallet structure, potentially used for telling apart different kinds of Pi.
Based on BIP32, yeah.
And then we have supernodes described as the absolute core of the network, processing all transactions. How do these pieces connect, according to the sources?
Well, the sources draw a pretty direct line between the technical function of these core elements and the network's broader goals.
How so?
They state, and this is another key quote, if they are activated, global value and GCV global consensus value will be realized.
Yeah, who are activated? The nodes.
The nodes, and specifically supernodes, yes. It connects their operational status. You remember, they handle all transactions directly to the network, actually achieving value or consensus on value.
Yeah, I see.
So the wallet structure in this described system is like the user's dashboard for managing their Pi, potentially organizing it by type, internal, external.
Right.
But any movement of that Pi, any transfer, necessarily passes through the supernode formation, according to these sources.
So the wallet organizes it, maybe differentiates it, and the supernodes are the mandatory highway for that Pi to move. And activating those supernodes is somehow tied to the network realizing its value, as described.
That's exactly the picture painted by the sources. They present these elements, the BIP32-based wallet structure with its potential for distinction, and the supernodes as the required transaction processors is fundamentally interconnected.
Interconnected and necessary, both for the network's technical operation and for realizing this described global value.
Yes, it's the interplay between these specific elements that the material really highlights.
That provides a really clear picture of the architecture and its intended purpose. Sticking strictly to the sources we analyzed.
Yeah, I think we've covered the main points. We've unpacked this idea of pyramidal wallets, linking it back to the source's reference to Bitcoin's BIP32 standard.
And we looked at how the material connects that structure to the whole internal versus external Pi question.
Right, and we definitely explored the significant role given to supernodes handling all transactions according to the sources.
And that key assertion linking their activation to the network achieving global value. And just to reiterate one last time, this whole analysis, everything we've discussed, is derived purely and strictly from those specific sources provided for this deep dive.
Absolutely. Which leads to a final thought, really. The sources place such heavy importance on activating nodes and supernodes for the network to hit this global value.
Right.
And according to those same sources, all transactions have to follow this supernode formation.
And the wallets use that specific hierarchical structure based on BIP32, which the source is linked to telling different types of Pi apart.
So putting all that together, what does this technical picture, as presented only in these sources, imply about the practical mechanics? How is a value actually intended to move and be recognized within this network, according to their description?
And maybe building on just the concepts introduced in these sources, how might you, the listener, explore that relationship further? The link between the specific technical structure they describe and the potential for widespread adoption or value realization just based on what the sources themselves lay out.